For this video, I'm mainly going to be talking about Andor, but I want to briefly touch on Tales of the Jedi just because I made a video on it, but it was my first time editing something and I butchered it in the edit. There's just too many cuts and everything. I just didn't like how it came out, but it's just too good of a show not to talk about. But before I get into all that, I just want to talk about Disney's ability to make two mediocre projects and then turn around and then make two fucking bangers. Like, it's just so interesting to me just how they could just fluctuate in quality like that. But I guess that's Star Wars in a nutshell. Let me backtrack and just tell my history with Star Wars. So I'm a 2000s baby, so I grew up on the prequels. And so I grew up on Star Wars when it was not good, and I still liked it. Obviously, now that I'm older, like, I can tell that there's major flaws in the prequel films, but back then I didn't give a shit. They were just fun to me. But like all Star Wars, there's some good parts in it. Like, you can never not convince me that final confrontation between Anakin and Obi-Wan is just not heartfelt. Like, you could feel the pain in like the delivery with Anakin's lines, and you could see it in his face just how hurt he is. Like, that shit is like crack to me. Like, I would watch episode 3 over and over again just for that end battle and just Anakin's like hatred for Obi-Wan. So I was shown a good amount of old movies growing up, like Indiana Jones, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Last Dragon, a bunch of like badly dubbed karate movies. There's a lot more, but like honestly, I can't remember right now. But point being, I was never shown the OG trilogy, and I would have fucking loved that shit as a kid. I didn't see the OG trilogy till I was in like 8th or 9th grade, but I wasn't like pressed to watch them because I loved the Lego games growing up, and that like includes the Star Wars Legos games. And those games, they fucking fuck. Like, they were just so good to me. And because of that, like, I wasn't, like I said, wasn't pressed to watch the OG trilogy until about like The Force Awakens got announced. And so then I was like, okay, like, we're gonna get the return of like the legacy characters, so let me go back and watch the OG trilogy. And like instantly I fell in love with them just like that. But that brings me to my gripe with Star Wars. Why is it so hit or miss? They have this rich environment that they've created, like with the universe and world building and everything, but they just can't seem to like consistently get it right. And I know like nothing can have a 100% success rate, and I like there's gonna be some stinkers in there, but it's just the inconsistency is just like baffling to me. The prequels have bad dialogue, the CGI doesn't hold up, Anakin's descent to the dark side should have been handled a lot better than it was. A lot more fleshed out, but the sequel trilogy infuriates me even more. Let me clear my system. This was the time to make it right. Why the fuck wouldn't you have a clear, concise plan on the conclusion of your fucking legacy characters? Like, it just does not make sense to me at all. Force Awakens was fine, but it was just a rehash of like The New Hope. Like, by the end of it, it's just like more of this. I hated how they treated Luke in The Last Jedi. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that our heroes shouldn't have flaws, but I just can't wrap my head around Luke ever igniting his lightsaber on his nephew, even if it's like he instantly knew it was wrong and it was like a brief lack of judgment. Like, this is the same guy who saw good in a genocidal maniac. Like, I just don't see it at all. The Last Jedi has good concepts, but it just executes them poorly. I just think the turn of Ben Solo was just very weak. And just for it to be the basis of the Empire, I just feel like Luke making a mistake should have been a lot stronger than a like simple miscommunication and something that could have been like solved over if they just sat down and talked about it. Like, it should have been Luke making like an actual big mistake with something like he cannot take back. And you could still have the self-exile and shit, because I like that. Like, Luke doing something so wrong that he just goes into hiding and just like he just can't live with himself. Like, that's cool. Like I just said, The Last Jedi has cool concepts, but it just doesn't use them to their full potential. They all have good visuals and good moments, but the lack of a plan is felt so much in those movies. I think the thing that is worse than being bad is wasting potential. And the sequel trilogy has so much of it. That's why it just makes me that much more mad. This intro is kind of long, so let me just wrap it up and just say the biggest thing I think they wasted in the sequel trilogy was fucking Finn. We could have had something legendary with his backstory, with him being abducted as a kid and then him defecting against the First Order and him being like a runaway stormtrooper. And then you add in, that's interesting in itself. And then you add in like the Force sensitivity. Like, we could have gotten some cool shit. Like, he could have been fucking curving blaster bolts like he was fucking wanted or something. just something different and new. Like, that would have been so cool. And then you could have still left the lightsaber shit to Rey and just had him like as, I mean, I don't want a clone of Han Solo, but you know, the gunner of the group, and just like doing some cool shit with the Force, like fucking doing trick shots with blaster bolts and shit, like just something different and cool. And that just would have been interesting to see instead of the same shit that we usually get. And then him just Rey, like he doesn't really add anything to the story past a certain point. But I digress. Besides that rant, like, this shit is not that important. Like, I mean, it is important, but it's not going to be the end of the world if Star Wars makes something bad, or like any franchise for that matter. Like, I'm not going to go online and just constantly spout my hate for it. It's just, I was talking about it and whatever, and I just wanted to get that off my chest. But this shit, a lot of people take this shit a little bit too seriously. And I understand if you're passionate about something, but at the end of the day, like, the world's not going to stop just because you don't like something or something you find is bad. Now let's get into some shit that I actually enjoyed. I'm just going to keep my thoughts on Tales of the Jedi brief just because I want to talk about Andor more. But this show is just too good not to say anything about. I'm not going to put any spoilers in when I'm talking about Tales of the Jedi, just because, I mean, I just briefly want to talk about it, and the less you know, the better, I guess. I mean, there's really not anything you could spoil majorly, but I won't be getting into any, like, finer details of the show. This show is just so fucking good, and it's just a great addition to the prequel lore. The prequels on their own aren't that great, but with the inclusion of Clone Wars to really flesh that out, and then Rebels to, like, kind of wrap that up, it just adds so much to those movies and just makes them feel whole. And Tales of the Jedi just adds to that greatness of, like, the Clone Wars adding lore to the prequels. In my opinion, Star Wars hits one of its high points when everything just isn't black and white. And I just say one of its high points because it does. Star Wars is at its best as well when it tells a nice and earnest story. But if you like Clone Wars Season 7, Tales of the Jedi has like buttery smooth animation and improved character models, so it feels like more of a continuation of Season 7. Just seeing young Dooku and Qui-Gon in this show was just so good. And just, this show really speaks to, like, the mindset and ideologies that these characters have when we see them later in the prequels. And just, you really see why they think the way they do. And it's just, like, so cool that they fleshed that out. I have a lot more to say, but this is mainly an Andor review. Maybe I'll come back to this at some point, but overall, the show is really good, and if you like Star Wars, you definitely should check it out because there's some really good additions to the lore in this show. But now, on to fucking Andor. This show is a fucking banger, bro. No cap. Like, we didn't just get one, but we got two fucking fire Star Wars projects back to back. The way a show that is about a character that isn't even the main character in the movie they're in is given more care and attention than two of Star Wars' biggest legacy characters is fucking baffling to me. Like, I don't get it. A show made about a character that we know that dies and they can't ever be in any real danger. And so then the importance of creating side characters that we're attached to and an origin that is not only about them but something larger than them becomes so important. And this show just does that to an astounding degree. And that's where Obi-Wan falls flat. And yes, I'm gonna keep talking about Obi-Wan because that show should have been way more better than it was. Obi-Wan tries to create tension between characters that we know nothing bad can happen to them, and then the inclusion of little Leia, she shouldn't even been in the show. It just adds an extra layer of unnecessary tension and just does not work. And they just try to put her in danger constantly. We just know nothing bad can happen. Honestly, at some point, I have to make a video on why, like, Obi-Wan was so disappointing to me. Because after watching this show, there's no reason that show should have been as mediocre as it was. When Star Wars is at its best, it feels so damn magical. And I feel so corny describing Star Wars that way, but it's true. And I just feel like a nerd saying that. But when Star Wars is at its best, it just makes me feel like a little fucking kid. And I just can't help from when I'm watching good Star Wars, just grinning ear to ear, like, the whole time I'm watching it. The world in the show feels so organic and lived in. And I just thought, like, what makes it so that it feels that way? And it has to do with writing and not treating your audience like they're dumb and over-explaining things that characters would already know about. It feels like characters already existed before we even got there. They give you just enough info and context so you aren't wondering what something is, and, like, they treat their audience like they're smart and can figure shit out. And that's what really, like, to me, is one of, like, the ways you can help make your world feel organic and just, you're not constantly over explaining things. For example, a character's using a tool to fix something and they or someone else doesn't like come up and say, oh, you're using the fucking hoobly blah to fucking fix your ship. But they wouldn't say that because they've been using those tools for a while and been around the tools, so they wouldn't need to explain what it is. But in the context, you see they're using it to fix a ship, and that's really all the audience needs to know. Like, they don't need to explain what it is. And it's just little shit like that that just makes the world feel more alive. The galaxy is huge, and I just love when Star Wars, like, we get to explore other cultures and just weird shit in the galaxy, because there would be weird shit. Like in this show, we get to see like different animals, like different species of weird animals, different food, different like weird drinks, like worm dissolve. Like someone puts like a worm in a drink and it dissolves and like changes color. Like that's the type of weird shit I like to see. Like there's this weird wet net gadget that someone uses at one point. I just really enjoy when Star Wars leans into the silliness of itself, because if you really think about it, Star Wars is silly, and just when they lean into that and embrace that, that's when Star Wars is at one of its best. And that's one of the components I think that you need in a Star Wars story to make it feel like Star Wars. The sets and costumes always have been a huge part of Star Wars to make it feel like the OG trilogy. And besides animation, because I'm pretty sure, I think it would be much easier to create the vibe of Star Wars in animation. You're not restrained by a lot of different things in the real world. This show and Mando season 1, in my opinion, have like come the closest to capture that nostalgic feeling of the OG trilogy. And that just has to do, like, this show in particular just has such good like on location shooting. Like they're in real areas when they shoot stuff, and like they have a lot of real and tangible sets that just gives it that one more step to like making it feel realistic. The performances in this show are just so fucking good, and they really feel like everyone is bringing their A game. Cassian just lights up every room he's in, and that's just due to the amazing performance of Diego Luna. And just when he's playing off of like great actors like Stellan Skarsgård, I hope I pronounced that right, and like Andy Serkis, like that's just a sight to behold. Biggs played by Adria Arjona and Mon Mothma played by Genevieve O'Reilly really bring their A game into this. I mentioned other people, so I wanted to mention them too, but I'll get more into their characters and spoilers. The atmosphere this show creates is so damn good, and it feels like Rogue One for obvious reasons, but it just feels like anything can go wrong at any moment. The battles just feel so visceral and heavy, and the tension, you can cut it with a fucking knife. It's just crazy how characters bickering in the woods is more tension heavy than like most of Obi-Wan, and definitely more than all of Boba Fett. It's just such a shame that this show gets more care and love than those two shows. Like, I keep saying this because I just do not get it. This show really delves into like all aspects of the pros and cons of starting a rebellion. Like the decisions that some characters are forced to make for the betterment of the rebellion can be just so like heartbreaking and morbid. I really appreciate that, because not everything is black and white. Like, oh, we fight the good guys and we win. Like, there is ramifications to doing this. And this show shows a lot of different angles of that, and I really like that a lot. They're playing chess, and both sides are good at this deadly game, and it just feels like it's a deadly dance. Like, it's just so delicate, and when one side steps, the other side steps, and it just feels like a beautiful exchange. I just love how much time we get to spend with the Empire and just really see how their system works. And the Imperial officer, Dedra Mero, is that Mero? Played by Denise Go. She's so good in this, and I hope we get to see more of her in some capacity. Since I'm on the topic of the Empire, I gotta talk about the Diet Empire, the fucking corporate officers. They're a bunch of butt munchers. This show makes it so easy to love to hate them, but at the same time, you get to see their side of it and not exactly sympathize with them, but you do see where they're coming from and why they go as hard as they do for the Empire. Before I get into spoilers, I just want to talk about some stuff I didn't mention before, but the editing in this show is fucking top notch. Not only going from shot to shot, which is masterful, like there's some really good edits in this show, but there just feels like there's no fluff. Like every shot feels important. It's just so fucking well made. The cinematography is really good. The casting is amazing. The score is fucking great. The sets and costumes are equally amazing. Like, everything in this show, it just feels like it had so much care and attention put into it. I really only have like one minor complaint, and I'll get to that in spoilers. But other than that, this show's fucking like chef's kiss. I have to give this shit like probably a 9 out of 10. Like, I really enjoyed this show. And there's really just one minor thing that I'll get into later. And I just realized I didn't rate Tales of the Jedi, but that's definitely like an 8. 7.5 or 8, because I didn't like it as much as I like this, and this is definitely like a 9 out of 10. Now on to spoilers. I'm not going to be going scene by scene, just some stuff I found cool or interesting. I love a little cute silly droid like R2. Fucking I like BB-8. Who else? Like K2 fucking K2SO, is that his fucking name? Well, the robot from Rogue One. He makes a brief appearance in this. I don't think it's actually him, but maybe just his model. And B checks all the boxes on my cute little droid list. His line delivery is just really good. That little stutter he has is so cute. And when the fucking officer pushed him over, I got so mad. It was like when the trooper punched Grogu. Like, I wanted to go through the screen and just like fucking choke him myself. I just love how grimy everything is. And Cassian is such a scumbag, and he still is by Rogue One, but by then he's a scumbag with like a purpose and direction, and he has somewhere to point that scumbaggery towards the Empire. All the plots were interesting, but this brings us to the only like really minor problem I have with this show is the fired corporal plot. It wasn't bad by any means, but it just didn't really stack up with everything else that was going on. And I know that like it's probably gonna have more payoff in season 2, but it just felt like kind of a drag. I did not like seeing it, but it was just not as good as everything else. Tim was such a knob and a hater. Like, he really called the jakes on my boy Cassian and then got smoked for it. Like, rest in piss, bozo. Mon Mothma's actress is so good, Genevieve O'Reilly, and the way that she just navigates the politics of Coruscant and just does it so gracefully. And like, you could see like the cracks that are starting to form like in her, like not resolve, but you could see the pressure getting to her, but she just handles it so good. And it was just so interesting to watch. Like, she's handling all this and putting up this front while all like secretly forming the building blocks to build the rebellion. I love seeing the different levels in Coruscant, and I really wish we got that 1313 or 1313. I don't know which one. That doesn't matter. But I wish we would have got that game about Boba Fett's earlier days in his bounty hunting life. It's set in the lower levels of Coruscant, like in like a Uncharted style game. We get to see a look at the lower levels in Obi-Wan, but we get to see a different look or more of a look at the higher levels in this show. And I just love to see shit like that. Just fleshing out areas that we already are familiar with and just going more in depth into them. What happened to Bix was so sad because I really like her character. She just has like a hard exterior, but you can tell she has a good heart, just like Cassian. I feel like that pairing, they really go together really well. I really love in this show like how every action has a consequence, and we get to see it for the most part. I hope she bounces back in season 2. But what would be really sad if Cassian doesn't get to make it back to like all his friends before he dies in Rogue One, because I think I heard that there's a time jump that sets this closer to Rogue One. So there's honestly a chance that he's not going to be able to make it back to see them again, which would fucking suck. Cassian flying through the eye was so cool, and the visuals and colors they used just during that whole sequence was just, I just love seeing space shit like that, and just with vibrant colors. And just seeing Cassian's resolve build up over time in this show was just also really good to see. Like, you see where he really starts out, like he hates the Empire, but he doesn't have the resolve or like mindset to really make a plan to like screw them over. And it's just with Luthen's like just over time just really getting him on that mindset to be in the rebellion. And speaking of Luthen, fucking Stellan Skarsgård's performances, oh my gosh, it was just so good. The like little monologue speech he has at the end about like what he's sacrificing for this, and like how much he puts on the line, knowing that he's not gonna see like the benefits of his actions. It's just, he just puts it all out there like every time he's out, and just his switch up of his like characters, putting up this front with the shop and just him being a secret fucking boss in the shadows. Like, bro, that shit is just so good. And then his ship just being tricked out with all type of shit, like the little shrapnel like missile things he fires at the tractor beam, and then he has the fucking double lasers on the side of his ship and like cuts the TIE fighters like butter. Like, that man was like, everyone's performance in this show was just so fucking good. The last thing I want to talk about is Cassian gets sent to the fucking raft like he's a Marvel supervillain. Like, how shitty does your luck have to be? This man just pulled off like the greatest heist in his like career, gets away, goes on like to his getaway spot, and gets fucking sentenced, gets caught and sentenced, gets caught for something he didn't even do. And then at first she's like, yeah, this is just a 6 months, or it used to be a 6 month sentence. So I'm like thinking, okay, it's gonna be like what, a year at most. And I'm like, damn, Cassian's gonna be sitting for a year. That's gonna suck. But I mean, what can he do? And then she says fucking 6 years. I literally said what out loud, and that just was such a good moment, and just like literally genuinely had me shocked. But at that point I was like, there's no way Cassian's doing that 6 years. Like, that man's breaking out somehow. I knew Andy Serkis was in this, but just seeing that emotion was just so great. And the guards the guards in their fucking prison had some fresh ass kicks on, and I just like the outfits in Star Wars in general. Like, people be dripped the fuck out for no reason. And Kino's character, Andy Serkis, not being able to swim, like when the prison break is like starting and they get to the edge, like, and you don't see what happens to him. Like, he could still be alive later. Hopefully we get him back for season 2 somehow, or later down the line in some type of way. But that moment was so heartbreaking, and it's crazy how I felt more emotion in that, and like than most of all of Obi-Wan. Like, there's no reason that should be a thing. Like, that show should have been a lot more heartfelt than it was. But that's pretty much it. This is a longer video, but there's just a lot to talk about. In Andor, I really enjoyed it. Everyone should go watch it. I think it's some of the best Star Wars we've gotten in a very long time. Just even if I like Mando a lot, season 2 not as good, but Mando season 1 was great. But just in general, like, this is just some really good fucking Star Wars, and I really enjoyed it. But I would be interested to hear your guys' opinion on why you guys like if you guys like the sequel trilogy, because I just like to hear different perspectives on when people like something I don't enjoy, because sometimes that makes me see like points I just overlook or just didn't see. And so if you did like the sequel trilogy, I definitely would want to hear why you liked it, and just your thoughts in general on Andor, if you liked it or if you didn't like it. Just put it in the comments. And yeah, I'm just interested to build like a community of not only like-minded people, but just people who don't always like the same shit that I like, because who wants to just have that constant like reassurance that something is good? Like, I would want to, sometimes I'm blinded by like bias and shit. Like, I'm not gonna see the flaws in everything. So it's just good to, that's why I like watching reviews, because sometimes they just point out shit that I just don't see, and it could sometimes change my perspective and sometimes it doesn't. And so yeah, so that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you for watching.